Hi, I'm Charlotte and this is Tired Mama Tries to Read. I've come outside because it's beautiful and in the next hour I'll probably start melting, so I better film this really quick. I've got 4 books to review today that I've read in the last few weeks, so I'm doing way better than I thought I would. We'll just go right in to Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. And there are my dogs that will bark throughout this entire video. Eddie, come here, sit with me, and then maybe you'll be quiet. We'll sit here. There we go. So, Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. I would say a 3 out of 5. I don't like giving star ratings because I don't really think it doesn't really reflect how you feel about a book, because even though this is 3 out of 5, I would recommend it, and I have been recommending it. But for me, there were a couple of problems, and I'll be really brief because I want to talk more about some of the other books. One is that it talks a lot about animal testing as part of the science that backs up the things that he's telling you. Obviously, that's unavoidable if that's the science that exists, but I just felt it was done so sort of blasé, you know, and then they did this to rats, and mostly it's just rats being poked endlessly so that they don't sleep, which I just found really upsetting. So, yeah, that upset me as somebody who doesn't eat meat and someone who supports animal rights. And the other thing I found a bit disappointing was that there's a chapter on breastfeeding and alcohol and how that relates to infant sleep. And I kind of felt, when I looked at the notes, I saw that all the studies he was talking about were from the 70s, from like 20 years ago, 40 years ago. And my understanding of alcohol and breastfeeding and infant sleep is that, well, basically if you can hold your baby, you can feed your baby. So yeah, I just felt, well, that made me doubt then how he'd interpreted other studies and the science he was using to talk about other studies. So I don't know, may seem like a small thing, but when you've been breastfeeding for like 2.5 years and you've been drinking a lot of gin for 2.5 years, it did sort of grate on me a little bit. So as I drank my gin and read my book, I felt enraged. Yeah, but I did really enjoy it, and there were lots of tips in there, great anecdotes. He loves sleep. He'll make you realise how important it is. So I would recommend. I'll go straight now to fiction. Look at this. Crudo. It's probably been everywhere on your YouTube and your Instagrams if it's anything like mine. It's the first novel by Olivia Laing, and it's incredible. Definitely recommend. I would have read it in one sitting if I hadn't had a tiny person trying to get me to play cards with him. It's set in, I'll tell you how Olivia Laing wrote it because it makes sense then how it is. She wrote it in 7 weeks. She set herself a word limit every day, and then she denied herself the opportunity to go back and edit it. So it's a very raw, Crudo is Italian for raw, very raw personal reaction to the world we're living in today, the post-Brexit, we're not post-Trump unfortunately, but the Trump-orientated world that we live in. It made me very emotional. It rang true with me. She goes into her reactions to the news, how it affects her personal relationships, how she feels saddened at the world. It's kind of autobiographical. If you read later Olivia Laing's biography, it kind of fits exactly with this, which is a writer who marries an older writer and her relationship with him. It's just brilliant. It's kind of like the modern day Virginia Woolf, which makes sense because Olivia Laing has written about Virginia Woolf. I just loved it. You've just got to go with it. You've just got to absorb yourself. Yeah, Chris Kraus recommends it, and I love Chris Kraus as well, so that should be enough. Viv Albertine, yeah, everybody important. So that's an excellent one. Then I read Sharp by Michelle Dean, beautiful book, lots of female writers, and this was The Women Who Made an Art of Having an Opinion. This is the one I want to talk about a little bit more. This is incredible. I really loved it. It's been very inspirational. I've bought books about the authors mentioned because, to my shame, I didn't really know a lot about them. I knew their names, but I even owned some of their books, but I haven't actually read them. The only one I knew from reading was Dorothy Parker, but now I've since bought a Hannah Arendt, and I already had a Nora Ephron, but I'm going to get a Mary McCarthy, because Hannah Arendt and Mary McCarthy were friends, which if you know anything about them is such a weird pairing, and I kind of want to read them side by side and sort of relive their friendship. Yeah, I'll show you the Hannah Arendt book I got in my Naughty New Books video, and it's huge. Right, I loved it. The chapters are all the individual authors, and then there's sort of interspersed with chapters about how, with two, sometimes three authors, talking about how maybe they wrote about the same subject matter, or how they were friends, or how they were not friends, which is a common theme in the book. Is a lot of sniping, a lot of bitching. You feel like you're in like a Manhattan cocktail party, which is it's really, really amazing. It's very centred around New York, even though some of the writers move away. It's all about the publishing houses within New York, the newspapers, etc. A real Michelle Dean is a literary critic to die for. She just delves into their work. She picks out really sort of unassuming sentences from their reviews or from their early fiction work, and she just says, here you can see the style as it's developing that would later turn into this and this into this, and she just makes it so exciting. You're never bored in these analytical passages, which I think is a real show of her talents. And then she intersperses those more technical bits with just gossip, and the backbiting and the anecdotes, and really, really brilliant. But I have one major problem with the book, which is, you'll see, here we go, the barking has begun. This is because someone has dared to go into the fields behind our house, or possibly even walk past our house. So, she talks about, here we go, these women, so the women she selected, came from similar backgrounds, white and often Jewish and middle class, and as you will see in the following pages, they were formed by the habits, preoccupations and prejudices that entails. In a more perfect world, for example, a black writer like Zora Neale Hurston would have been more widely recognised as part of this cohort, but racism kept her writings at the margin of it. Even if it did keep Zora Neale Hurston at the margins, which I don't know, I think that's debatable, why does that stop her from being included now? This is written in the 20th century, so it covers sort of like early 20th century right through to sort of the 90s kind of period. I don't know, Harlem Renaissance springs to mind. This is set mostly in New York. I don't understand why those writers that were huge influences in the Harlem Renaissance couldn't have been brought into this so-called mainstream book. I'm offended by the fact that it's mainstream because these people are white. And then, of course, she says that she can't include people like Zora Neale Hurston, and how sad, I can't include her because she's on the margins. And then she does include her. I find it so weird. There's a chapter called West and Hurston, and it's about Rebecca West and Zora Neale Hurston. So Hurston is the only writer to feature in the chapter headings, and she doesn't have her own chapter. All of the others have their own chapter in there as well, and an additional chapter with somebody else, mostly. Hurston doesn't. It's a tiny sort of 6-page chapter, 6 or 7 pages. All the others are much longer, and it's comparing them in their reports, sort of more journalistic writing. West is reporting a trial about a lynching, and Hurston is reporting the trial of a black woman who stabbed a white man. So they're race crimes, I suppose. Yeah, they're race crimes, but they're totally different crimes. And they got nothing to do with one another. She's just put them side by side. I just found, I've wondered where there was an editor saying, okay, you either need to make that chapter longer or you need to just take it out, because it just looks like tokenism to me. I don't know, I just feel like it's a dangerous game to play when you start doing things like that. And later on she does say, that some of the black writers were writing for white newspapers too. So therefore they were within this so-called group. I think it's writing like this that keeps them on the periphery when they shouldn't be. So yeah, that was a huge criticism. So despite loving the book, I can't get over that thing that's missing. So yeah. I went back to diversity, thank God, with Jenny Zhang, with her amazing collection of short stories, Sour Heart. And it was, as I don't know if you can see on the cover, it's chewed up chewing gum. I don't know why they've chosen that as a cover, but it's awesome. This is a collection of short stories, but even if you're a short story hater, I think you'll probably enjoy, because they're quite long short stories, and they've all got characters that reappear all the way through, so you feel like you're really part of this world. They're all immigrant stories. All of them Chinese American, although it does feature a lot of other immigrant stories on the sort of surrounding, and a lot of other just life in kind of, well, ghettoised parts of, is it New York that it's set in? New York, yeah, I should know that, seeing as I've read it. So you've got, hello Eddie, you've got quite a dramatic and harrowing and just, yeah, very moving set of stories, all through the eyes of young girls. Can I sit down? All through the eyes of young girls who are trying to make their way as either first generation, or I think actually all of them are first generation immigrants. I don't think there's any second generation. They are, yeah, it's gritty, it's real. There's some hilarious scenes, there's some harrowing scenes. The writing is beautiful. I'll just read you a little snippet from the front. Where are we now? We lived in a one-bedroom apartment so subpar that we woke up with flattened cockroaches in our bed sheets, sometimes 3 or 4 stuck on our elbows, and once I found 14 of them pressed to my calves, and there was no beauty in shaking them off, though we strove for grace, swinging our arms in the air as if we were ballerinas. Yeah, it's beautiful. It can swing from something beautiful like that to a really graphic description of bodily movements. So, yeah, definitely one of my top picks. It's just so good. So concludes my 4 reads, and I have already started and almost finished another book, and I've bought another little collection, which I'll show you in the next video. So, hope you're enjoying the sun if you've got it, and see you soon.